What's up, everybody? Welcome back inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for a practice report presented by the fine folks over at Byers Auto. If you're looking for a new or used auto, head to Byers Auto in Central Ohio. That's Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom.
I'm the 40-year vet, Tim May.
Are you now? I've heard that. Reports confirmed, folks.
We've got like a bunch of animals at my house, so I'm a vet. Go ahead now.
The 40-year vet, Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom. Fellas, just heard from Jim Knowles and Ryan Day. Not too eventful of a media session, but we got some running back updates. Ryan Day was nice enough to buck the trend a little bit of the injury report, not really saying much, by saying he would be, quote, shocked if all three of the Ohio State running backs miss on Saturday.
All three, yeah.
Which means that they're expecting at least one of them to be back. So that's the biggest report, I think, to take away from this media session with Ryan Day.
Yeah, and that was more like a wiggle worm kind of remark, because he thinks one of those three, and I think he's including Chip Trainum in that?
Yep.
Yeah. One of those three will be available at least on Saturday. We'll see. You know, we talked about this yesterday in the stadium. I think it would behoove them, and this isn't slamming Maryland at all, but it would behoove them to maybe rest the top two dudes who are both dealing with something that's been nagging them all year. I mean, well, obviously, Mayan Williams picked up a sprained ankle, which I don't think he's been really dealing with. He's been dealing with a leg, situation pretty much all year, but played really well despite it. But it would behoove them to rest both of those guys, because I think Dallin Hayden is capable. I think Xavier Johnson is capable, and if Chip Trainum's available, I think he's capable. But there's something about keeping some momentum going too. But it's really interesting how they've just had this revolving door at running back. And I think that has really hindered them in getting that just pure feel of their running game like they would like to have this point in the season. But, the big one is really next week, and it's looming.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Day said last week that he wanted to show more depth at running back, and then we come to game time, and there's not much depth to be had. So I think, he's trying to do what he can, a little bit of its tactics, right, to not give away too much information. So I'd be, shocked if we see actual depth, whether that's strategic to hold back Mayan for that reason.
You surprised. You used the word surprised.
Yeah. Surprised. But, we'll see what it is. I think there's something to be said about gaining some momentum, not only with the offensive line, but with that running back group as well.
Yeah.
And we talk all the time about the attitude and the toughness of the offensive line, but I think there's something to be said about that with the running backs too. So, yeah, maybe you do rest Mayan, but you get out of rhythm a little bit. I know he missed the Michigan State game and then came back, and he still ran hard, but I think you need to have some momentum there too, and I think you just got to start leaning on some guys, and Dallin's probably got to have a bigger role than we expected.
Yeah, and the other thing real quick about Mayan, if he's in the game, he's going to give you that over the top effort, you know. So you got to play it from his vantage point too. Well, wait a minute, if we do put him in, there's no such thing as this guy going 95%, And there are a lot of, like I asked Ryan, there are a lot of things you have to juggle right now when you've got a team. Like I said, you're driving this car and careening downhill and going 90 miles an hour, and parts are flying off, and you're grabbing parts and putting them back on, and it's just a weird time for a head coach this late in the year to kind of just keep the thing going straight and narrow down the road, when in fact you want to save some of it for that big push. It's just what an interesting psychological dynamic.
Well, yeah, and I think it's even more interesting because the big push starts this week. You can't just go to Maryland,
correct,
a road trip, and expect to just be able to come home and prepare for Michigan. You've got to take Maryland seriously. So that's the dynamic here. The thing about the running back situation for me is, I'll be honest, just on a hunch, I don't think we'll see Mayan Williams on Saturday. Again, just a hunch. But Travion Henderson, could he be there in uniform in an emergency role? I don't know, maybe. Chip Trainum, an emergency role, maybe. But if Dallin Hayden's running the ball well, and his spell is Xavier Johnson, or even just lining up Mitch Rossi and putting three other wide receivers out there and passing the ball out of those sets, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think Ohio State will have success doing that. Penn State just ran wild on Maryland's defense, so I think Dallin Hayden, Xavier Johnson will be able to do just fine. But if you can get Travion Henderson some work for the first time in 3 weeks, if you can get Chip Trainum comfortable in a running back role, just in case you need him against Michigan in 11 days, I don't think that would be a bad thing. And so they're in an interesting spot, but I don't think they're in a disadvantageous spot because I think there is enough meat on this running back bone to be able to get through Maryland and not have to play those guys unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, and I'm interested, in Emeka Egbuka. I'm interested what his sort of status is. Maybe we'll know at the end of the week, when we get to talk to Ryan one more time. But that's where, I'm not pounding my own story that I wrote, but Xavier Johnson is such the X factor on this team. When you consider he could be the backup running back on Saturday, he could be the guy that plays for Emeka Egbuka if he can't go or if they decide to hold him out. That's crazy. I mean, how many players have come through here that can do either or of those two things? Maybe Curtis Samuel is the last guy I can remember being that flexible. But they've got the ability to get through Saturday, barring any other catastrophes. I mean, Josh Fryer showed himself so well at right tackle, with the exception of maybe one play that still kind of sticks in Ryan Day's craw, but he graded a winning performance there at right tackle. I think that might have been his first start. Am I wrong?
It was.
Yeah, his first start, and in place of DeJuan Jones, and so they have the ability to get past Saturday with what they've got, and move in because you want to be as close as possible. And it's saying something like the sun is hot. You want to be as close as possible to 100% going into that Michigan game.
A couple things I'll say on that. Josh Fryer, great performance overall. As you mentioned, Ryan Day graded him as a champion. He was the play side tackle for a lot of those big games, especially when Mayan Williams was in there. The other thing I'll say, though, is DeJuan Jones was having a great season, too. So,
yes.
Even though he was out, I don't think you can point to that and be like, well, Josh Fryer should be the guy. Indiana, as we talked about ad nauseum, is a really bad team, and they're really bad stopping the run. And that's not anything to take away from Josh Fryer's performance, but I think DeJuan Jones would probably do similarly well in that situation, too. But it's definitely good to have a 6 offensive lineman. They can either bring in on heavies, that bison package, as Ryan Day says, or if someone gets hurt, to plug in. And the other thing about Xavier Johnson is that I thought it was interesting today that Ryan Day mentioned that he feels like he's more fit to play running back. They've always felt like, even though he can do both running back and wide receiver, they actually feel more comfortable with him at running back. So that was a little bit interesting to hear.
Yeah, and the thing, but why do y'all think I picked DeJuan Jones to be the offensive player of the week, just to pick a lineman? Because I saw a mismatch there that was ridiculous, And I think Josh Fryer, that is a great game to get your first start in, to get some confidence about yourself. Guys, I've gone back and watched that game a couple times, really, certain parts of it, and that was a lot like watching the Ohio State first-team offense go against the second or third-team defense here, and vice versa. The Ohio State defense going against the second or third-team offense, that's what it looked like to me on video.
Yeah.
I mean, the play where Jack Sawyer had I think it was his second sack, not the one where he almost took the quarterback's head off, but the second one, they just ran a simple stunt, and he just came through the middle. There was nobody there, and, it may end up being that way against Michigan, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
So that's a good confidence-building game, but it is nowhere near what you're going to face on November the 26th.
Yeah, no, not at all. And
Not even this week, actually.
I don't think Saturday will be quite what they're going to face on November 26th.
This is a team that took Michigan
to the brink. Yeah, had the ball with a chance to tie the game late in the fourth quarter. So this is a good football team. The Penn State score might be a little misleading. That game snowballed for Maryland, but Talia Tungabailoa, Jim Knowles talked about a little bit. He's got an ability to evade tacklers. They've got 4, not just 1 or 2. They've got 4 talented wide receivers. I look at Jacob Copeland. I look at Raheem Jarrett, guy that Ohio State recruited.
Yeah.
They've got a running back that I think does some damage. So this Ohio State defense is going to need to be on its P's and Q's, but I also think this is an Ohio State defense that's getting better in large part because of the emergence of Teron Benson and Ty Hamilton. I asked Ryan Day about Ty Hamilton. Then it was followed up by others who asked Jim Knowles about Ty Hamilton and Teron Benson. There's a new starter on this defensive line. It's Ty Hamilton, and he is playing at an extremely high level right now for Ohio State.
You remember how his brother came on, Devon?
Super quietly, but it was there.
But it is so reminiscent of his brother, except it's earlier, I think, than his brother did. But Devon Hamilton ended up being one of the better defensive linemen in the country, I thought, his last year. And Ty, I zeroed in on him like 4 or 5 times on Saturday. He's getting off the ball, he's shedding his dude, and he's getting after it. And or he's holding his ground where you had to hold your ground. And I think, that's the thing about a team like Ohio State. I've said this a million times. I'll say it 1,000,001. You just have these guys that have been embedded in the program for a year or two, or three sometimes, or Xavier Johnson's situation, 4 or 5, who just kind of emerge as the season goes on that other teams of lesser recruiting values don't have.
Yep.
You know, and that's what sets an Ohio State, a Georgia, and even an Alabama, even though they're having their tough year this year, sets these programs apart. And I think you're seeing that at Michigan too this year. So, wow, I just keep looking at that collision. You know, you just Ryan Day, I'm sure, is just everyday folks and guys. You got to beat Maryland first. Funny thing about it is they could lose to Maryland, still play for the Big Ten championship if they beat Michigan, but the big dream would be gone probably.
Andy, yeah, there were some questions today from to Ryan Day about looking ahead. I think there were 4, if not 5. That's a lot. It's not a secret around here what November 26th means at all. It's also not a secret that game's been circled since November 27th, 2021. And you know what? Next year, I think it's November 25th. That game's already circled. So it's not a secret that...
A circler out there.
It's not a secret that Ohio State's looking ahead to Michigan, but you can't look too far ahead because you got to go to Maryland.
Exactly. And Ryan Day talked about that 2018 game against Maryland. 52-51, back and forth game. The late Dwayne Haskins starting that game and helped Ohio State win. But that's just a great example of going on the road, playing a team that at the time Maryland was pretty beat up, still gave them their A game. And, you know, that was a heck of a win, but a heck of a scare too.
Oh.
And I think, you know, that's what's actually interesting too about that game is he mentioned, you know, they throw on 4th and 1 to kind of get that victory. There's been a lot of questions about the philosophy of running on short yardage situations. If that's out of Ohio State's identity, should they be more, you know, spreading it out like they do the rest of the game? And Ryan Day kind of subtly mentioned twice in his press conference, hey, we threw on 4th and 1 there. We also threw on 4th and 1 in the Rose Bowl. I think, you know, maybe that was a coincidence. Both those things came out today, but I think showing a little bit, yeah, okay, we do throw the ball sometimes on short yardage situations.
Yeah, you know why? Because that's what they do best. Number one. Number two, it's hard to gang up. I mean, you saw Maryland on Saturday. If you watched the video from the Penn State game, I'm telling you, fellas, you could have put a lasso, a 30-foot lasso around the offensive and defensive players on, I think it was Penn State's second touchdown, and Penn State went off right tackle. It was a 3rd and short or 4th and short, went off right tackle and scored. I mean, you never know, you know, but they just ganged up so big. I'm just screaming, man, play action, throw the ball to the tight end or something, you know. Mm-hmm. But instead they parted the sea and the kid ran for the touchdown. And it actually happened twice in that game, the same play, which is interesting. So at this point in the year, and Ryan Day touched on it, you do whatever it is that you feel best, and I'm paraphrasing that a little bit, that gets you that first down or gets you that touchdown. That's what it's all about now. I mean, he would like to have seen them proving that point 3 or 4 times last week, didn't get that proof that he wanted, but on one he did. The first, you know, Mayan Williams touchdown, they cracked it, man, on 4th and 1 or 3rd and 1? 3rd and 1. Cracked it over right tackle behind Josh Fryer and Matt Jones, and boom, he was gone. And they got great blocks on that play. That's all you're looking for now is whatever you feel at that moment gives you that best shot for that first down or touchdown.
So
I sound like I'm lecturing football 101. Sorry.
That's okay, Tim. We don't mind.
I mean, who cares how you get there as long as you get there?
So here, Tim, I'm just going to lay it out. Ryan Day can do all the coach speak he wants about not looking ahead. Everyone is looking ahead. We've been looking ahead for a couple weeks now. I won't be surprised if Ohio State does a lot of base things, the things that you don't have to show because you don't want to show too much. It won't surprise me. You know, they're going to say that they're going to just do whatever it takes to win. But I've seen this song and dance before. The week before the Michigan game, you either throw it all out there to put so much on film or you put nothing on film. And so, you know, maybe they go back to those tendencies so they can break them again. I don't know. It's just interesting to me. This dynamic of this week might be even weirder than trying to talk about next week because you could do so many different things and it's all building up to what everybody's already looking at. Yeah. So it's just an interesting week.
Yeah. Well, Indiana did a good job. I mean, they got C.J. Stroud on that play down near the goal line when he kept and got stopped for a 1-yard loss, kept to the left. And then Ohio State pulls out one of these, you know, razzle-dazzles, I call them, kind of plays down there. You remember? Mm-hmm. And I'm going, well, there was in that game. Why are you running that play? You understand what I'm saying? Well, why don't you keep that in your hip pocket? But now Michigan's got to prepare for that. So does Maryland. I'm talking about that fake reverse back around. Forgot who ended up with the ball. It was Marvin Harrison Jr. Got some good blocks out there on the edge.
Had to push Luke Whippler ahead and get him out of the way.
Yeah. Luke was sort of, he'd already blocked his man. He was looking for somebody else, But you kind of wonder sometimes why coaches do pull those plays out when they do. A lot of it has to do with befuddling the teams you're going to play next as much as it does trying to get down the field. But, I mean, I don't think you go in this game and just say, we're just going to stay basic. But, Maryland got beat 30-0 by Penn State. It was in inclement weather, as you said. It was raining there, it looked like. But it was raining for both teams, right? As I like to say. It may show you, that's a good indicator of where Maryland is right now, although it was on the road, and where Ohio State is right now. Because there weren't ideal conditions in Ohio Stadium on Saturday, and they pretty much ran their attack. Agreed? But it was against inferior competition. Maryland's kind of in that muddle, in that middle zone, middling, of how good is this team really, the way it started, but the way it's been playing the last couple of weeks, it doesn't look that good.
Yeah, I would call Maryland right now mediocre. I think it's not a bad team.
Right.
Not a good team. I'd say they're mediocre.
You agree with that, Andy?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's kind of a tale of two seasons for Maryland right now. Even the last couple of games they won, it was close against Indiana.
Yeah.
It was close against Northwestern. And so...
Yeah. And it wasn't against Penn State.
It wasn't against Penn State. Of course, they were on the losing end of that one. So I think the last 4 games for them have been very up in the air in terms of how do you evaluate what kind of team are we going to see? Are we going to see the one from the first half? Are we going to see the one from the second half? I think Talia is a little bit more healthy, I would think, at this point now than he was the last few games. But, I mean, we'll see.
Saturday, though, I mean, they didn't have much that worked. And like Spencer, you pointed out, they got some quality dudes at some of those skill spots on offense. Couldn't get the ball to them for the most part, or couldn't get much done with it. So, they're really in a struggle. If they were coming here, I think it'd be prohibitive favorite situation. But there's a couple things, that odds makers are smart. They see the periscope up for Ohio State fans right now, looking ahead to next week. Why wouldn't players, at least in their subconscious, be doing the same thing? So a 20-something point favorite, you'd think Ohio State would be bigger than that at this point.
One thing I'll say, too, is that this offense that Ohio State's facing is much better than the one they've been facing recently.
Yeah.
This is a offense that, as Spencer mentioned, has a ton of weapons. Also, 2 tight ends with, I think, 24 more catches this year. So across the board, that receiving core is pretty legit. And it's going to be a test for the secondary, that's had trouble at times this year. It hasn't always been healthy. Cam Brown and Jordan Hancock were back last week, and I'm sure they'll be tested. And we'll see. I mean, I'm sure Ohio State will do fine offensively in scoring points, but it'll be interesting to see how many points they give up and what kind of...
Just like 2018 went over there, but that defense was in such disarray. It was crazy. And I didn't see that kind of game coming. You never know what you're going to see on Saturday, really. And if they get a couple, like you said, if they get a couple of successful plays, big-time plays, they could be in that game. I mean, when you back somebody into the corner, how do they respond? We've seen Ohio State backed in the corner several times this year, responded, in my opinion, when it counted most in the fourth quarter, extremely well. I mean, Notre Dame, Northwestern, Penn State. I think this team is up to that, if you follow my drift. But every Saturday is a new challenge.
Ohio State has averaged 69.5 points per game in 2 matchups against Maryland under head coach Ryan Day. We will see what the Buckeyes provide on Saturday, as they can't look too far ahead to Michigan, but we certainly are already thinking about that one. Buckeyes are focused on Maryland, folks. We'll see just how focused they are on Wednesday when we're back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for full coverage of Buckeye player interviews. That's the 40-year vet Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching the latest practice report presented by Byers Auto. If you're looking for a new or used auto, head to Byers Auto. Fellas, $10 for an entire season, off-season, up until kickoff next year, August 31st, 2023. If you want all that for $10 at lettermenrow.com, go there right now, get that deal. That is a hell of a deal if you ask me.
Does that get you access to On3?
It does, absolutely.
That's a hell of a deal.
The whole shebang. Tim, Andy, Spencer, Byers Auto Practice Report. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.